Yeah, I think I mean I wrote a piece today actually for Goal, which sort of said that I think they probably would have been thinking about buying a centre back. I think that maybe need to be brought forward till January, because if you look at what they have now, let's say we write Gomez off until March, just as a I'm not doing that, but let's just say we are. So you're looking at Van Dijk and Gomez out until then. You've got Joel Matip is now the only established centre back at the club, specialist centre back, and we know his history of injuries. He's only played 90 minutes twice in a year, so history tells you that probably he's going to get some sort of knock or muscle injury before the end of the season, or before the end of the year even. So you are going to be left with what? Nat Phillips, Reece Williams, Fabinho, Billy Cometio, James Milner, Jordan Henderson, who players who don't normally play centre back, and players who've never played centre back in the Premier League, prior to this season. So it isn't an ideal situation. I think Liverpool took a risk going into the season. They let Lovren go to Zenit, and they didn't replace him directly. They banked on Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, and Fabinho. 3 of those players now are injured. The 4th one has been injured already. So I think Liverpool need to go, and that's the next investment for me. I think they need to go and buy a centre-back. Then you ask me who. Such a tough one, isn't it? Because you look how many clubs are looking for a centre-back. Manchester United, what would they give for a centre-back? Chelsea needed a centre-back in the summer. They went and got Thiago Silva, who's in his mid to late 30s. That was the situation they found themselves in. Tottenham are going to have to sort of, I would imagine, they just bought a young Welsh centre-back, Joe Rodon from Swansea, but really they're going to have to replace Toby Alderweireld at some point. Arsenal, how long have they been looking for centre-backs? They spent big on one in the summer, but it hasn't really made too much of a difference yet. And then you've got Manchester City and the amount of money that they've spent. They've thrown a lot of darts at the board. Bought 2 more centre-backs in the summer, but they haven't yet found a way to keep those clean sheets. So it's not as easy as it should be. I think when you look at Leicester and the guy that they signed in the summer, I think that was one that you think, maybe that was an opportunity. A 19-year-old centre-back, £30 million from France in Fofana. Liverpool will go down that route of buying a young centre-back that be developed into something top class. Who it is, I'm not entirely sure, but there are a few out there. Koundé from Sevilla. There's Ben White at Brighton. There's Kabak from Schalke in Germany. So there's been links, and there will be more links, I'm pretty sure, in the next few weeks. But I wouldn't say I'd be surprised if they didn't, but I think it would be a mistake if they didn't buy a centre-back in January. And there isn't even an argument, to be honest, to say that they might need to.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, very warm welcome to the VAR Show, the show which talks about various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to have interviews, and we have one of the most renowned football journalists, Mr. Neil Jones, with us. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank Neil for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the welcome. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. How am I? Yeah, it's a strange time, isn't it, for everyone really, and a strange time for football, obviously, as we've seen across the world in the last 8 or 9 months, and for journalists as well, it's different. I'm getting used to this application, using Zoom and speaking to people via Skype, and it's been new, but not too bad, to be honest. I think us journalists, and particularly those of us who follow Liverpool and the Premier League, we've had it a little easier than like to say that I've had it really tough. We haven't really. It's been pretty good, and thankfully we've got some football to report on as well. And with Liverpool, they always keep you nice and busy.
So definitely, before we move on, I want to ask you: do you like international breaks, or do you like it, or do you?
I don't like them from a football perspective. I'd rather have football to watch. That I'm interested in. I have to say I don't have a great deal of interest in international football to watch, but I think in a season like this, for a journalist who's reporting daily, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, sometimes it's nice to have a week or two that you can breathe out a little bit and look to do maybe a few other things, have a bit of time off. So yeah, I wouldn't say I enjoy them, but they're quite welcome.
Definitely, and but still being correspondent for Liverpool does not. I don't think so. You get off because you have a lot of things to cover. Maybe like the piece you wrote about Gomez today or Liverpool
Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what you think. You think you've got a day off, don't you? And then obviously Joe Gomez suffers what seems like it might be a serious injury in training with England. So you never really can switch off in this job. I mean, you have to try. It's important for anyone that they have the balance between work and life. But yeah, when you cover a club like Liverpool, which is a 24/7, 365 days a year job and occupation, you don't get too much time to rest and relax and to recuperate. But you've just got to find ways to do it, and we're very lucky. I count myself very lucky to be able to follow a club that has such a big audience across the world. I mean, you guys there, you're in Nepal talking to me. That's how big Liverpool are. There's only a handful of clubs I think in the world that have that kind of reach. So we have to accept that that's the price that comes with it, and it's not a big problem for me. Trust me.
Definitely. I'll get straight to the beginning. And how did it all start? Like football, journalism, Liverpool for you.
Yeah, do you know what? It was something I always wanted to do when I was younger. I found an old sort of school book that I had. I found it quite recently actually, and it was sort of when I left school, and it was people who'd written you messages, wishing you all the best for the future, and sort of every message that was in there, besides the usual sort of jokey ones, we're all sort of saying, oh, you know, good luck writing in the newspapers and good luck, becoming a journalist. So it was obviously something I'd talked about and something I wanted to do while I was in school. And then it sort of went off track a little bit. When you get to an age, your priorities change sometimes, and you want to go and earn a bit of money. You want to go out drinking. You want to do all the things that young people do. And I went off the sort of journalism trail, if you like. I never went to university to study. I went into work, so I had sort of 4 or 5 years where I wasn't thinking about it. And then, as it happens, we're talking about Joe Gomez there. This is a strange sort of symmetry, but I injured my knee. I tore my ACL like Van Dijk has done, and I was off work for sort of 2 months, 10 weeks, and during that time I was bored. So I really started writing. I started typing up articles about whatever was going on the previous night, match reports or whatever. I was just doing it for fun, and it got me into the mood of it. And I was very, very fortunate in 2009 at Goal, where I work now. As it happens, they were someone to write about Liverpool. They'd seen a few things that I'd written for a few websites, just small sort of blog sites, and they asked me to do the job, and I left the job that I had and went into full time. Which, when I look back, I'm surprised at myself because it was quite a big decision to make, but it was one that, when I look back on it, I think it was the right one.
We have barely spoken for around 5 minutes, and we have already mentioned Joe Gomez twice. How serious is the injury?
Yeah, it's not a good news, put it that way. I mean, it's knee injuries, whatever they are, are always a problem. This one, we don't know the severity of it. What I would say is I think Liverpool haven't yet ruled him out of, they haven't put a time frame on it, which they haven't done with Virgil van Dijk as it happens, but I don't think they're yet willing to rule him out for the rest of the season. I think he's suffered an injury to one of the tendons in his knee, which will obviously keep him sidelined. I think it'll be a matter of months rather than weeks, which is obviously a huge blow for Liverpool. But I think the biggest problem and the biggest sign that it's not a good injury was it wasn't sustained in a challenge, or it wasn't a suck to the knee or whatever. It was a twist in motion. It looks like he's got his foot caught in the grass, played a pass and then tried to turn, and obviously that's twisted, the knee and the ligaments and whatever else. But it's it's a huge blow for him as a person, first and foremost. We always, in the media, always talk about what does it mean for Liverpool? What does it mean for Jurgen Klopp and the centre backs? But let's think about the player in this instance. He's had some pretty bad injuries already in his career. He's only went through an awful lot, and he'll be absolutely devastated. And I can only, I'm sure you'll echo me in wishing him a speedy recovery, a quick recovery, and a full recovery, because he's a lovely guy, Joe Gomez. He's one of the nice guys in football, and to say that he deserves a bit of luck is an understatement. And hopefully he gets it with his recovery.
Definitely, you are reading a piece where, like Liverpool probably, if they were not planning to buy after Van Dijk's injury, definitely they will be planning. In your opinion, whom should they target?
Yeah, I think I wrote a piece today actually for Goal, which sort of said that I think they probably would have been thinking about buying a centre back. I think that maybe need to be brought forward till January, because if you look at what they have now, let's say we write Gomez off until March, just as a I'm not doing that, but let's just say we are. So you're looking at Van Dijk and Gomez out until then. You've got Joel Matip, who's now the only established centre back at the club, specialist centre back, and we know his history of injuries. He's only played 90 minutes twice in a year, so history tells you that probably he's going to get some sort of knock or muscle injury before the end of the season, or before the end of the year even. So you are going to be left with what? Nat Phillips, Reece Williams, Fabinho, Billy Cometio, James Milner, Jordan Henderson, who players who don't normally play centre back, and players who've never played centre back in the Premier League, prior to this season. So it isn't an ideal situation. I think Liverpool took a risk going into the season. They let Lovren go to Zenit, and they didn't replace him directly. They banked on Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, and Fabinho. 3 of those players now are injured. The 4th one has been injured already. So I think Liverpool need to go, and that's the next investment for me. I think they need to go and buy a centre back. Then you ask me who. Such a tough one, isn't it? Because you look how many clubs are looking for a centre back. Manchester United, what would they give for a centre back? Chelsea needed a centre back in the summer. They went and got Thiago Silva, who's in his mid to late 30s. That was the situation they found themselves in. Tottenham are going to have to I would imagine. I mean, they just bought a young Welsh centre back, Joe Rodon from Swansea, but really they're going to have to replace Toby Alderweireld at some point. Arsenal, how long have they been looking for centre backs? They spent big on one in the summer, but it hasn't really made too much of a difference yet. And then you've got Manchester City and the amount of money that they've spent. They've thrown a lot of darts at the board. Bought 2 more centre backs in the summer, but they haven't yet found a way to keep those clean sheets. So it's not as easy as it should be. I think when you look at Leicester and the guy that they signed in the summer, I think that was one that you think, maybe that was an opportunity. A 19-year-old centre back, £30 million from France in Fofana. Liverpool will go down that route of buying a young centre back that can be developed into something top class. Who it is, I'm not entirely sure, but there are a few out there. Koundé from Sevilla. There's Ben White at Brighton. There's Kabak from Schalke in Germany. So there's been links, and there will be more links, I'm pretty sure, in the next few weeks. But I wouldn't say I'd be surprised if they didn't, but I think it would be a mistake if they didn't buy a centre back in January. And there isn't even an argument, to be honest, to say that they might need to.
If it how the common theme that at least what Liverpool are following is that they don't have a timeline of the players returning from injury, which probably will not put the player under immense pressure to return back on time. So do you think that also is maybe a strategy so that they don't get targeted in the transfer window when they are going for a player?
Possibly, yes. I think there's definitely an element to that. I think what the first thing you said was absolutely spot on. If we're saying straight away Van Dijk will be back in March, then as soon as we get to February, all the questions are: how's Virgil? Is he on track? Is he ahead of schedule? Is he behind schedule? What's the latest? we've seen with Liverpool, just another example. Oxlade Chamberlain is another example. We haven't seen him since August. No real time frame on his return yet, which is unusual. Thiago, another one at the moment where it seems like it's always just a few more days. It does take some pressure off, and I think there will be an element to that with Liverpool that they don't want to be rushing, seem to be rushing in the transfer market, and for clubs to be, well, you obviously need him now, which means we can put on an extra 10 million. I suppose the bonus for Liverpool, if it can be classed as such, is the transfer market the way it is at the moment means that probably clubs outside the top bracket are less able to resist, I think, bids for players. So where in the past, let's just, for argument's sake, a Crystal Palace or someone could maybe have said, no, we want 80 million for Wilfried Zaha, we want X amount for this player. They might actually be in a position now where they think, well, we've lost a fair bit of money. There's no fans back in the stadium yet. We're still going to be losing money. Maybe it might be the right time to cash in on certain players. So it's an offset balance. But I think Liverpool will find it difficult to recruit a centre-back because, well, all clubs are, and we've seen Liverpool in the past. Remember Van Dijk? I think everyone, when Liverpool missed out on Van Dijk in the summer of 2017, everyone said, well, you go and buy someone else. You have to go and find an alternative. And Liverpool didn't believe there was one out there. It took them, another 6 months to get Van Dijk, another 5 months. And, it paid off handsomely. But they need to get this next decision similarly correct.
And you mentioned a very important name there, that is Chamberlain. And do you think the time is ticking for him? Because last season he was, I think, he had the most goal and assist, combined, or goal contribution other than the front three. And this season you have another player like Diego Jota who has come in and probably has kind of filled in the role what Chamberlain was maybe expected when he arrived initially. Do you think that time is ticking for him at Liverpool?
Possibly. I mean, it's. I'm always wary about saying things like that because obviously it's not his fault that he's injured. He can't really help the bad luck that he's had. Really, he's had a horrendous knee injury, and other than that, it's the longer you're out, the more difficult it is to become a major player. And you look at him, you look at Naby Keita. The impact they've had has been good when they've played, but they haven't played often enough, or they haven't played a run of games often enough. And Liverpool's team is evolving, and it always will. And it is difficult for a player when he's been out for any length of time. I mean, give you a good example. Probably Danny Ings would be a good example of that. You look at him, what a good player he was at the time, playing well, got injured. And by the time he came back, Liverpool were a different team. Nathaniel Klein, another example of that. Was first choice right back and missed a year of football. And by the time he came back, he probably wasn't suited to what Liverpool were trying to do. So I think Oxlade Chamberlain still has a role to play. I like a lot of the things that he brings when he plays. He shoots from outside the box. He takes risks. He adds, like you say, he adds numbers in terms of goals and assists, which maybe Henderson, Wijnaldum, Milner, Fabinho don't do. But I think it's worth. And I think that he's missed so much football because he's at the age where he wanted to be playing regularly, he wanted to be making an impact, and he has looked at times in his career like he's capable of doing that at Liverpool. But obviously, every single time it does, it seems like something has popped up to upset the rhythm. So I'd like to see him back before Christmas. Put it that way. I'd like to see him back in the side and playing games before Christmas because, as I say, the longer he goes, and the amount of players Liverpool potentially have in midfield, the competition is going to be strong. So I think he does have a challenge on his hands, but I wouldn't be writing him off just yet.
Definitely, the next question that I have is you follow Liverpool much more closer than what I do, and probably Klopp he has been experimenting with the his formation, especially with the injuries he's had. And there's also the factor that I don't know whether it's true or not. He had mentioned even Andy Robertson can play in the centre back role. Probably he does that for Scotland. So do you think what Klopp had initially maybe thought about the formation, that again he has to change after Gomez's injury?
Yeah, he's gonna have to do something creative, I think, with it, because either way he's gonna have to take a risk, isn't he? Matip Matip, if he's fit, which is a big if, obviously given his injury history, Matip will be there as the number one centre back. You've got Fabinho, hopefully be back, a week, maybe even next week, maybe the week after. So if you had Matip and Fabinho for the length of time, that would be a positive for Liverpool. But you also have to offset that they've got so many games coming up. They have a dozen games between the 21st of November and the 2nd of December, which is huge. It's no time at all, and you've got 12 games in there. You've got Leicester, you've got Wolves, you've got Tottenham, you've got Atalanta, you've got Ajax. All these tough fixtures over the Christmas period. You aren't going to be able to play the same team more than once or twice really in that period. So you are going to have to get creative, and whether that's giving Nat Phillips another go, whether it's Reece Williams playing at the back, whether it's, like you say, Andy Robertson moving infield and playing Tsimikas at left back, whether it's Jordan Henderson dropping back into centre back or Gini Wijnaldum. It's not going to be ideal. I think Liverpool have to get their heads. Well, I think Liverpool will have got their heads around that fact that it's going to be a little bit patched up. It's going to be a little bit unusual. Some of the lineups will be. You might see a change in system, like we saw at Manchester City, where we saw a front four rather than a front three, a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-4-2, whichever way you like to look at it. I think that's just what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to mend and make do and get by, and it won't be ideal. There'll be some games where it'll look, the team sheet will land and people will be sort of going, oh, what's he playing there? Where's he? He's playing him at right back or him at left back. That's just the way it'll have to be. And I think that, again, the silver lining to that cloud is I don't think they'll be alone. There'll be other clubs that have to do that as well, because we've seen other clubs are getting bad injuries. You look at Manchester City. I think Ake, he limped out for the Netherlands last night with a hamstring injury. There's an injury there. Aguero struggling with injuries. I think De Bruyne has had a few knocks as well. So they're not the only club that will suffer injuries. It's just that all Liverpool's injuries seem to be in the same place or something, and that's it's not the best place to have a lot of injuries, is it?
Definitely, like you mentioned, like how you have a lot of games and games coming thick and fast, in the next maybe month or so, and the players have it tough. As a journalist, how difficult is it for you to constantly, being updated and doing everything?
Yeah, it's probably easier with games. It's easier when there's games because it breaks up. There's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to it. Like you have the pre-match press conference, you have the game, you have the post-match press conference. So you have some sort of structure to it. Whereas if you've got a week between games, then you are sometimes having to come up with ideas to fill the space. It tends to be events led. The events will dictate what you're going to be writing about, as we've seen with Gomez's injury or Van Dijk's injury or Fabinho's injuries basically. But I wouldn't say it's too draining or anything like that, or too taxing. I actually think if you ask any journalist what would they rather be reporting on, they'd rather be reporting on a game, going to a game, watching a game, whatever they're doing, than sitting there coming up with feature ideas, on a Tuesday for the Sunday game, or having to come up with, think about set piece interviews and that kind of thing. So no, it's not too bad for journalists. I welcome the amount of games. It gets me out of the house more than anything. It gets me out of this bedroom and sort of out of the four walls and some fresh air. So I couldn't complain.
Definitely, like you mentioned, like how games are coming thick and fast, and I'll touch on the topic again. And you have had a lot of players and managers complain about the same. And do you think that the fixture load on a player is humongous, or is it just plain lack of luck for Liverpool? Or to quote you, did Jurgen run over a black cat or 10 at the start of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no, I think the fixture load is huge on players, and I know there's a lot of people from bygone eras who will talk and say, well, we just played, we didn't worry about fatigue, and we didn't worry about recovery days and whatever. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Yeah, but how many people do you see from that era? I mean, I bumped into a lot of them at the press box that their knees are shot, their ankles are shot. They have terrible sort of hip problems and that kind of thing. They pay the price in later life for those, that bravery or whatever that they like to would like to think about. these players now play at a pace and an intensity that is unrecognisable compared to 10 years ago, never mind 20, 30 years ago. And to be asked to do that, we'll use Liverpool as an example, so to be asked to do that for Brazil on a Wednesday, fly back on a private jet from Peru on a Thursday, come back in, train on a Friday morning, and then play a Merseyside derby against Everton on the Saturday. It's a huge demand. And then you factor in that, you go home on the Sunday, you have Monday, and then you're preparing for a Champions League game on the Tuesday, so it's, the load is huge. You think about the international football. I think by the end of this international break, England will have played 8 games in sort of 2 months, which, you add that into the amount of Champions League games, Premier League games, Carabao Cup, FA Cup obviously to come in January, Community Shield, whatever else there's been at the top level. The demands on players is absolutely huge, and it's no Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp. I'm sure Jose Mourinho will have the same opinion, talking about 5 substitutes and having bigger squads and whatever else, because something has to give. And I'm not saying that Joe Gomez getting injured is directly as a result of that, or even Virgil van Dijk. Sometimes it is just bad luck, but there is a definite trend that there are more injuries, more muscle injuries, more load-bearing injuries, and more injuries that are the result of accumulated fatigue worldwide across the top level clubs, whether it's Liverpool, Bayern Munich, Manchester City, Real Madrid, wherever. Players are being pushed to the limit. And it is a little bit like cross your fingers and hope that you get through it. And Liverpool have had a bit of luck with certain players, touch wood. Mo Salah plays so regularly. You look at Andy Robertson, seems like he's, a real sort of monster physically. Sadio Mane the same, but you won't always get that luck, and you shouldn't be, I don't think, relying on luck to get players through a season, especially a season like this. I think there needs to be more done to look after the players and ensure that they're safe, fit, healthy.
Definitely. I'll move to another maybe current affairs in regards to Liverpool. Liverpool moved out of Melwood and they have gone to Kirkby, and where they probably Melwood they had housed since 1950s or probably the late 1950s, when I think Bill Shankly moved there, and they moved from Anfield to the for training. What significance does this move have, as a team, also for the youth setup coming through, because they'll be training together?
Yeah, they will. Well, they will. Yeah, they'll be on the same massive site. They won't necessarily be together. There will be a split between the first team and the youth facilities, but it will be a lot smaller. The split. I think it's an overdue move. Personally, it's something that I know Brendan Rodgers, when he looked at back in, when he was in charge, was always keen to explore how they could get them on the one side. And probably what Brendan lacked at that time was he didn't really have the power at the club, because he was still a young manager. He was still finding his way. He was still trying to get Liverpool to a certain level. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp, when you win the Premier League and the Champions League, you're able to swing your bat a little bit and to say, I want this. And it's it makes sense from every perspective. As Jurgen says, it makes no sense for him to be driving however many miles it is from Melwood to Kirkby to watch a youth game. He's losing half his day if he's doing that, because he's obviously got the journey time, he's got the the logistics of it. Now he's got the capability of stepping out of his office and taking a 5-minute walk, and he's there, watching the under-16s or the under-18s or the under-23s, whatever it is. When there's a problem in a training session where a player drops out, you've got another pitch, a phone call away there to send the player over. If your left back pulls up with a hamstring problem, there's another left back there who can come down from the under-23s and under-19s, whatever, and join in. So it will make a big difference. I think from the youth perspective, I think it will also give an extra push. There is something special, I think, about these youth players when they get the call to go up to Melwood, and they get the taxi or whatever, or the car across, and that does feel like a big move for them. But I think it'll be even more symbolic when it's sort of, you move from one dressing room to the other. You get to cross that divide, if you like. You get the call, come over. I think it'll be even more. And when you're coming into work as a young player, you're 18, say, with a young centre back, and you look across, and there you go. There's Virgil van Dijk also, warming up or in the canteen or whatever he's doing. I think it will give you that extra inspiration as well. So I don't see it being anything other than a positive move. Obviously, the facilities will be a lot more modern and more spaced out, and I think the design of the place looks pretty special as well. So I can't see any negatives besides, always sad when you part with a little bit of history. Whether it's a player, a manager, a training ground, a stadium, a stand, whatever it may be. It's always a little bit sad when you're letting go of something that's played such a big part in the club's history. But I think in years to come we'll be looking at Kirby in the same way. Well, hopefully anyway.
Definitely. And we're getting to the end, and I have last few questions, and one of them is sent in by one of the viewers, Navin Katel, and he has asked how does Klopp motivate his players to keep the hunger alive after they have basically won almost everything?
Yeah, it's difficult. It is. It's the biggest challenge, isn't it, for any club? I mean, football is so cyclical that there are so few examples of clubs that have been able to win consistently for more than say 5 years. Really, you look, even probably the greatest team I ever saw in my lifetime would be Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, and even they couldn't do it every single year. They were beaten to the title by Real Madrid. They went out to the Champions League against Mourinho's Inter, wasn't it? Who knocked them out of the Champions League. So it is difficult to do it. What I would say is I think Liverpool have gone about it in exactly the right way. That there's not been any dramatic ups and downs. They haven't gone and splurged £200 million on 6 new signings and sort of right, we're going to do that. They've picked the signings the way they would pick them. They've tried to address what you might say would be the weaknesses in the squad. And I'd also say that you've seen in the last even month that they still have that fighting spirit. And if you think you think Virgil van Dijk, the blow that was of losing him, and you think of the reaction since, Liverpool, really have weathered that storm pretty well. Now they've got another storm to weather with Trent and Gomez out, but I think there's a good mindset there, and it comes from the manager. I think it's him making sure that this isn't just a flash in the pan. It's not just a sort of Liverpool had a couple of good. He wants to leave something more meaningful, more lasting there, and yeah, I wouldn't back against them at all. I really wouldn't.
Definitely, you have of course been in the company of very esteemed players and coaches. On a personal note, have you ever been starstruck by any of them?
Tough question, to be honest. Probably when I first started. Yeah. I think absolutely. Steven Gerrard, when you first in his company, as a young reporter, or a new reporter. I wasn't young, to be honest. I was, but I was a new reporter. When you're in company of someone like that who you've watched for so many years and sort of admired, there is an element of speak when you're spoken to, and don't sort of don't do anything stupid. Don't make an idiot of yourself. Just keep yourself nice and quiet and calm. But I think there is an aura about Jurgen Klopp when you interview him, but there's also a disarming nature to him. He's very he makes it comfortable. So probably he's not the same sort of. I'm trying to think of an example, but for example, if I was to bump into someone like, let's say, Tiger Woods or Michael Jordan, there would be that aura about them where you think, oh wow, these are serious people. Jurgen Klopp is of that profile. Obviously, he's at the top of his game, but he feels like more of a person you can relate to and you can talk to and you can really find a level with. So I think that Jose Mourinho would probably be in that latter category with Tiger Woods and people like that. So it's not that difficult. The players really are pretty good, pretty humble, pretty sort of approachable, easy to talk to. So there isn't really a great worry there. But yeah, the odd occasion. Listen, if I bumped into Messi, if I had to interview Messi, I think I'll be struggling to get me questions out. To be honest, I'd probably just want to try and get a selfie or whatever, And I don't apologise for that. He's the greatest player I've ever seen and probably will ever see. So you have to have your heroes sometimes, and yeah. But generally with Liverpool, no, they're a good bunch and decent to talk to, and I'd like to think that I've never really made too much of a fool of myself with them.
Definitely, during your career as a journalist till now, if you had to choose one moment as a standout moment, which one would that be?
100% the Champions League final in Madrid. The last, once Origi had scored, once Origi had scored to make it 2-0, because obviously you had sort of a couple of minutes and then you had stoppage time, so we knew Liverpool had won the Champions League. And if you think, I mean, I've seen Liverpool win the Champions League before as a supporter, in Istanbul, obviously, and you've seen great nights and great games. It wasn't a great game particularly, but when you sort of, you've shared that journey a little bit, not that I was part of it, but you've been everywhere. You've been to Paris, you've been to Munich, Barcelona, you've witnessed that incredible semi-final. You've shared the planes and the trains with all the supporters and heard all their hopes and fears and all the stories of how they've got over to Madrid and getting coaches from here and planes from there and driving from wherever, to sort of have that few minutes where you're thinking they're about to get everything that they want. When that whistle goes, that will just be where everything will be worth it. And for the players as well, so many of those players, I mentioned Joe Gomez, Andy Robertson, great guy, Jordan Henderson, incredible guy, Alisson Becker, lovely guy, Sadio Mane, Mo Salah, all these players that you've spoken to various places and you've sort of heard them talk about how much they want to win the Champions League or to win a big trophy. You're happy for them. Then you get the joy of standing in the called the mix zone, where you're sort of waiting to do the interviews afterwards, and all the players are coming through with the medals around their necks, and you see how happy they are, and you're hugging and they're high-fiving, and it was just a great sort of 4 or 5 hours, really. It was just a great couple of days, the Friday, Saturday. And when I look back on my career, I mean, obviously the Premier League was taken away by the fact that there was no fans allowed in the stadium. That probably would have topped it if it had been a normal time. But that feeling of celebration and the end of a journey, almost, the culmination of so much hard work, I think that would be the one that I'd always place above everything else.
Definitely. And so we'll wrap it up with one final question. And do you have any piece of advice for young journalists who are just starting out?
Yeah, a few. Yeah, I mean, one of my one is really is read as much as you can about football. I mean, it sounds very straightforward, but whether you feel like you're interested in it or not. I mean, I remember sort of starting out and reading about Eastern European football, for example. Not really something that's going to necessarily help me, but you learn so much about writing. You learn so much about what a journalist had to do to get information and the research that's gone into things like that. And I think what has to be expected of a journalist is you have to be a subject matter expert. You have to be an expert in football. You have to have a passion for it. You can phone it in a little bit. You can say, well, yeah, I do half a job or whatever, but you'll be discovered pretty quickly. I think you have to have that passion for it. You have to read. You have to know what your history. You have to know certain clubs, players, whatever, beyond your own sphere. And the more that you know, the more opportunities there will be for you somewhere down the line. You never know where those opportunities will come. I always I get a lot of people who email me about Liverpool. They want to write about Liverpool. I understand it. I know a lot of people do, but that's a negative as well. Sometimes everyone wants to write about Liverpool. If you can write about X, Y, and Z as well and still retain that, then you're going to stand out from the crowd. So I would always say, don't limit your ambitions. Don't limit your horizons. Don't focus too much on your local or one particular league or one particular club or whatever. Broaden it and find out as much as you can about as many areas of football as possible, because it'll stand you in good stead.
Definitely. And like on that note, Neil, thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best for the upcoming season, and hope we can read more information about your articles, which I follow religiously every day. Thank you so much for coming once again. Hope we can talk again soon. Till then, take care, stay safe. Bye.
Thanks for having me. No problem.
Thank you so much.
Player-wise, it would have to be Steven Gerrard, just because, again, before he became a journalist, he was someone I just admired massively in terms of the absolute complete footballer. I think if you were trying to make a footballer in a factory, it would be Steven Gerrard, someone who I think JB Carragher summed it up best once when he said, Steven Gerrard's biggest strength is he doesn't have any weaknesses.
The stadium. I don't see really need to do that. Mainly such a big spending, but it's true that it would be a fantastic stadium. That's not bad, but you have to be careful, and mainly at this moment when we are going to face a very difficult time.